Good morning, everyone. Happy Thursday. I hope everyone is having a fantastic morning and we're waking up and getting ready to get going on our schoolwork. All right, so what we're going to do today is we're still going to look at a butterfly's life cycle, but Sloan just walked in. I think she knows that you guys are watching. We're going to look at author's purpose instead of looking at main topic today. So main topic is what the story is mostly about. Okay? So the butterfly's life cycle, our story was about a butterfly's life cycle, right? They was trying to teach us and show us how a butterfly went from an egg to a butterfly. Author's purpose is what you're going to look at today, and that is why the author wrote the book. So what was he trying to teach us? What was his purpose for writing? What was he trying to show us? Okay, so I want you to think about why he would write this story, okay, and then write that down. All right, then we have your assignment for today is called A Closer Look. So I want you to figure out why, the author's purpose, the why, okay? And then I need you to answer 3 questions, okay? And those are all written out under the assignment. The first question is, what are the stages of a butterfly's life? Okay, remember those headings would probably help you guys figure that out, right? It's important that you guys figure out the stages of a butterfly's life because tomorrow you're actually going to put it all together and make a life cycle, okay? The second question is, a caterpillar molts, just like a snake does. It loses its skin, right? How many times does it molt before it's full grown? So go back in your text, look back where it says caterpillar, okay? And then maybe see from there if you guys can figure out how many times it molts before it's full grown. Then it says in the glossary, find the word that tells us what a caterpillar eats. Now I've seen that as a lot of your guys' fun facts or your 3 things that you learned, you guys have been using the name of this plant, okay? So once you use the glossary, you can look up the name of what it eats and then you can answer question number 3. Okay, so I want you to tell me what the author's purpose is, and then answer those 3 questions, and that all goes under a closer look assignment, okay? So that's what you guys are going to do today, and then Thursday, so I think you guys owe me some iReady minutes, right? You have 30 more iReady minutes to get, so that's what I want you to do. And then, your writing assignment for today is we've learned a lot of different life cycles for animals. We've learned about a turtle, a butterfly, and what was the other one that we did in class? A tadpole, a frog, right? So I want you to think about which one was your favorite and then tell me why, okay? So pretty simple, all right? And that's what you guys are going to do today and turn it into me. Make sure you can see it. I have been loving seeing all of your work. I really enjoyed watching you guys or reading all of your answers for how you helped out around the house. I thought that was so awesome that you were so helpful for your family. Some of you did chores for your brothers and sisters, and then some of you did chores for your parents, and I thought that was really cool. So I'm really glad that you guys helped out. That was really fun for me to see. I got to see some pictures of you guys doing your chores, which I enjoyed. All right. Okay, I'm going to read to you now. Remember, Annie and Jack said that they knew how to catch eel and clams, and I don't think they know how to. Chapter 5, Eels and Clams. Jack looked at Annie. "We can't stay here," he said. "What?" she said. "We can't go home now. The pilgrims need us to help them." "But we don't know how to do anything," said Jack. "And Squanto's going to figure out he doesn't really know us, and—" "Don't worry so much," said Annie. "We help Mom and Dad make our Thanksgiving dinner every year, don't we?" "We can help the pilgrims, but we'd better hurry." Clutching the big basket, she started running towards the bay. Jack sighed and then ran after her. At the rocky shore, they stopped and looked around. Little waves rolled onto the short stretch of sand. The salty air felt clean and fresh. Seagulls swooped over the water. "I wonder where the eels are," said Annie, "and the clams." "I'll look in the book," said Jack, and he pulled out their book and looked up eels in the index, and he turned to the right page and he read aloud. Squanto showed the pilgrims a way to catch eels. He showed them how to push the eel out of the wet sand with their bare feet and then grab them with their hands. That sounds fun, said Annie. She put down her basket and pulled off her shoes and stockings, and she held up her long skirt with one hand. Then she walked over to the rocks at the edge of the water. Jack put the research book in his bag and pulled off his shoes and stockings and joined Annie. They dug their feet in the bare wet sand. I don't feel anything, said Jack. Let's wade in the water, said Annie. Together they stepped forward. Brr, said Annie. No kidding, said Jack with a shiver. She kept squishing the muddy sand with his toes. He felt pebbles and shells, and then he felt something soft. Hey, I think I found one, he said. Annie splashed over. Where? Stand back, he said. Here. Jack squished harder with his feet, and a soft thing moved. Jack squished more, and the eel slithered through the water. Jack grabbed it with both hands. Ah, he yelled. And there he is catching it. The eel was long and skinny like a snake, and it was slimy and icky, and it twisted and squirmed. Annie laughed as Jack tried to hold on to it. The eel wiggled out of Jack's hand and fell against Annie. Yikes, she yelled, jumping away and bumping into Jack. With more screams, they both tumbled into the cold water. They scrambled up and splashed back to shore. Annie was still laughing. Poor eel, she said. We scared him half to death. Him? Said Jack. Forget eels, said Annie, her teeth chattering. What about clams? Jack was wet and cold, but he took out the book again and looked up clams. He turned to the right page and he read aloud. Squanto taught the pilgrims how to dig for clams. Clams are a hard shell. They live for 60 years or more, and the oldest have been known to live almost 100 years. Oh, forget it, said Annie. What? Said Jack. We can't catch them. They live to be so old, we just can't end their lives. Jack sighed. He sat down on a rock, and Annie sat down next to him. Their clothes were soaking wet. Their feet were caked with muddy sand. Their basket was empty. What other things do pilgrims do to help? Jack opened up the book again, and he searched pilgrim children. Pilgrim children worked very hard. They built fences and cared for animals. They planted, harvested, and ground corn. They picked up pumpkin, peas, and beans. They gardened in the field. They fished. They hunted. They carried water. They collected nuts. They cooked. They cleaned. They did everything they were told, and they never complained about being tired. Oh man, I feel tired just reading this, said Jack, and he closed the book. We make lousy pilgrim children. Yeah, I know, said Annie. Maybe we could do something like keep an eye on a turkey and tell them when it's ready. That's how I help Mom every year. Annie, Thanksgiving in Frog Creek is a whole different story than Thanksgiving for the Pilgrims, said Jack. Annie, Jack, a voice called. Jack quickly put their book away, and then they turned around. Priscilla was standing on a rock, and she held a pumpkin and carried a basket filled with yellow squash and red corn. I was looking for you, she said. Well, hopefully she's not upset that they weren't able to catch any eels or clams, right? We'll have to continue reading later on, okay, this week. So that's going to be that for that. And now we're switching to Charlotte's Web. So Wilbur and Charlotte and Templeton are on their way to the fair, right? So let's see. When they pulled into the fairgrounds, they could hear music and see the Ferris wheel turning in the sky. They could smell the dust of the racetrack where the sprinkling cart had moistened it, and they could smell hamburgers frying and see balloons aloft. They could hear sheep battling in their pens. An enormous voice over the loudspeaker said, "Attention, please. Will the owner of the Pontiac car, license number H2439, please move your car away from the fireworks shed?" "Can I have some money?" asked Fern. "Can I too?" said Avery. "I'm going to win a doll by spinning a wheel, and it will stop right at the right number," said Fern. "I'm going to steer a jet plane and make it bump into another one." "Can I have a balloon?" asked Fern. "Can I have a frozen custard and a cheeseburger and a raspberry soda pop?" asked Avery. You children, be quiet till I get this pig unloaded," said Mrs. Arble. "Let the children go off by themselves," suggested Mr. Arble. "The fair only comes once a year." Mr. Arble gave Fern 2 quarters and 2 dimes, and he gave Avery 5 dimes and 4 nickels. "Now run along," he said, "and remember, the money has to last all day. Don't spend it all in the first few minutes, and be back here at the truck at noontime so we can all have lunch together. And don't eat a lot of stuff that's going to make you sick to your stomachs. And if you go on those swings," said Mrs. Arble, "you hang on tight. You hang on very tight, you hear me? And don't get lost," said Mrs. Zuckerman, "and don't get dirty. "And don't get overheated," said their mother. "And watch out for pickpocketers," cautioned their father. "And don't cross the racetracks when the horses are coming," cried Mrs. Zuckerman. The children grabbed each other by the hand, and they danced off in the direction of the merry-go-round, towards the wonderful music and wonderful adventure and wonderful excitement, into the wonderful midway, where there would be no parents to guard them and guide them, and they would be happy and free and do as they pleased. Mrs. Arble stood quietly and watched them go. Then she sighed, and she blew her nose. "Do you really think it's all right?" she asked. "Well, they've got to grow up sometime," said Mr. Arble, "and a fair is a good place to start." And there they are, walking out into the fair. Kind of looks like the Florida State Fair, right? While Wilbur was being unloaded and taken out of his crate into his new pig pen, crowds gathered to watch. They stared at the sign, "Zuckerman's Famous Pig." Wilbur stared back and tried to look extra good. He was pleased with his new home. The pen was grassy, and it was shaded from the sun by a shed roof. Charlotte, watching her chance, scrambled out of the crate and climbed the post near the underside of the roof. Nobody noticed her. Templeton, not wishing to come out in broad daylight, stayed quietly under the straw at the bottom of the crate. Mr. Zuckerman poured some skim milk into Wilbur's trough, pitched clean straw into his pen, and then he and Mrs. Zuckerman and the Arbles walked away towards the cattle barn to look at the purebred cows and to see the sights. Mr. Zuckerman particularly wanted to look at tractors. Mrs. Zuckerman wanted to see the deep freeze. Lurvy wandered off by himself, hoping to meet friends and have some fun on the midway. As soon as people were gone, Charlotte spoke to Wilbur. "It's a good thing you can't see what I see," she said. "What do you see?" asked Wilbur. "There's a pig in the next pen, and he's enormous. I'm afraid he's much bigger than you are." "Maybe he's older than I am, and he has more time to grow," suggested Wilbur. Tears began to come to his eyes. "I'll drop down and have a closer look," Charlotte said, and she crawled along the beam until she was directly over the pen, and she let herself on a drag line until she hung in the air just in front of the big pig's snout. "May I have your name?" she asked politely. The pig stared at her. "No name," he said in a big, hearty voice. "Just call me Uncle." "Very well, Uncle," replied Charlotte. "What's the date of your birth? Are you a spring pig?" "Sure, I'm a spring pig," replied Uncle. "What did you think? I was a spring chicken? Ha ha! That's a good one. Eh, sister?" "Mildly funny," said Charlotte. "I've heard funnier ones, though. Glad to have met you. Now I must be going." And she ascended slowly and returned to Wilbur's pen. "He claims he's a spring pig," reported Charlotte, "and perhaps he is. One thing's for certain, he has the most unattractive personality. He is too familiar, too noisy, and he cracks weak jokes. He's also nowhere near as clean as you are, nor as pleasant. I took quite a dislike to him in our brief interview. He's going to be a hard pig to beat, though, Wilbur, on account of his size and weight. But with me helping you, it can be done." Look how big that pig is compared to Wilbur. Charlotte looks so little next to him. "When are you going to spin a web?" asked Wilbur. "This afternoon late, if I'm not too tired," said Charlotte. The least thing tires me these days. I don't seem to have the energy I once had. My age, I guess." Wilbur looked at his friend, and she looked rather swollen, and she seemed lifeless. "I'm awful sorry to hear that you're feeling poorly, Charlotte," he said. "Perhaps if you spin a web and catch a couple of flies, you'll feel better." "Perhaps," she said wearily, "but I feel like it's like the end of a long day." Clinging upside down to the ceiling, she settled down for a nap, leaving Wilbur very much worried. All morning people wandered past Wilbur's pen. Dozens of strangers stopped to stare at him and admire his silky white coat, his curly tail, his kind and radiant expression. Then they would move on to the next pen, where the bigger pig lay. Wilbur heard several people make favorable remarks about Uncle's great size. He couldn't help overhearing these remarks, and he couldn't help worrying. And now, with Charlotte not feeling well, he thought, oh dear. All morning, Templeton slept quietly under the straw. The day grew fiercely hot, and at noon the Zuckermans and the Arbles returned to the pig pen. Then, a few moments later, Fern and Avery showed up. Fern had a monkey doll in her hands and was eating Cracker Jacks. Avery had a balloon tied to his ear and was chewing a candied apple. The children were hot and dirty. "Isn't it hot?" said Mrs. Zuckerman. "It's terribly hot," said Mrs. Arble, fanning herself with an advertisement of a deep freeze. One by one, they climbed into the truck and opened lunch boxes. The sun beat down on everything. Nobody seemed hungry. When are the judges going to decide about Wilbur? Asked Mrs. Zuckerman. Not till tomorrow, said Mr. Zuckerman. Lurvy appeared, carrying an Indian blanket that he had won. That's just what we need, said Avery, a blanket. Of course it is, replied Lurvy, and he spread the blanket across the sideboard of the truck so that it was like a little tent, and the children sat in the shade under the blanket and felt better. After lunch, they all stretched out and fell asleep. All right, guys, and that is it for that chapter. So I want you guys to go and finish your assignment, okay, for today. Remember, you're going to tell me the author's purpose and answer those 3 questions, and then you're going to tell me what your favorite animal has been to learn about. Okay? I hope everyone has a very fantastic Thursday. Oh, I almost forgot. Today at 3:30 or 3:45, all of the teachers are going to drive around all the neighborhoods around school, around Temple Terrace, okay? So if you come out of your house and you live next to Temple Terrace, if you come out of your house around 3:45, you should be able to see Miss Coda and I driving around waving to you guys, okay? All right, I hope to see you guys later, and if not, I will see you tomorrow. Okay? Bye, guys.